Thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. What's up, everybody? I'm Finn McKenty. This is the Punk Rock MBA, and today we are here to talk about none other than Deftones, who are easily one of the most influential bands in their entire generation of rock and metal. They're the band that single-handedly introduced shoegaze to millions of alternative kids across the globe, and are often referred to as the Radiohead of metal because of how experimental their music is. And despite being formed way back in the late 80s, they're as relevant today, if not maybe more so, as they were in the glory days of nu metal way back in the early 2000s. But what exactly has been the key to this kind of longevity that they've had, as opposed to so many of their nu metal peers who either broke up or just faded into obscurity? And more importantly, what is their lasting impact? Those are the questions that I will answer in this video. But first, if you haven't, please join me on Twitch. I'm streaming twice a week from 4 to 7 p.m. Pacific on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and there's a link to that in the description of this video. And in order to answer those questions, we need to start at the very beginning. Deftones were formed in 1988 in Sacramento, California, and released their very first album, Adrenaline, produced by the legendary Terry Date in 1995. And fun fact, the album cover is actually not a seashell. It's a thing called a bulb syringe, which is used to get boogers out of babies' noses or cleaning out their ears. I remember my mom used to use one of these on me when I was a kid. Not really sure what was behind the artistic decision to put this on the cover, but I guess we will never know. And musically, it's their heaviest and most raw album in their whole catalog. And even though they were probably rightfully classified as nu metal back when it came out, you could already tell that they had more to offer than your average nu metal band at the time. Despite it being their most straightforward album, you can already hear a subtle but diverse range of influences from industrial and hip-hop and even some post-punk. And although you could plausibly say that this is a nu metal album, it honestly has a lot more in common with 90s post-hardcore bands like Quicksand or Helmet than it does with Limp Bizkit.
But it's something else that brought us peace. Keep it all inside so we feel we can't unleash.
And initially, the album was labeled as unsuccessful because it didn't really have a huge impact. I remember at the time, they were just sort of seen as kind of a middle-of-the-pack band. But through word of mouth and relentless touring, the band did manage to build a dedicated fan base, which led to Adrenaline selling over 220,000 copies at the time. Another thing that really helped put them on the map is their appearance in the 1996 movie Crow, The City of Angels, where they're playing an unreleased song off of Adrenaline called Teething. And overall, the band certainly did see some success during this time, but they were really kind of lingering in the underground. But that was about to change in 1997 with their breakthrough album, Around the Fur. It debuted at number 29 on the Billboard Top 200 and went on to be certified gold by 1999. Songs like My Own Summer and Be Quiet and Drive got a ton of airplay on alternative rock radio, and that is what really catapulted them into stardom. And this is also the album where they started to introduce a lot of the shoegaze elements, which they're now known for. And to this day, it's regarded by a lot of people as the best Deftones album, and it's also Chino's favorite. He's even gone on record saying that he thinks this was their peak as a band, and they'll probably never top it.
I was probably angrier than I've ever been in my life, but I was probably happier than I've ever been in my life. On every emotion, it was like the pinnacle of all those emotions, and that record was very dynamic for those reasons.
The album was certified gold by 1999 and later on platinum, but their real commercial peak came in 2000 when they released their third album, White Pony. It debuted at number 3 on Billboard. Their song Elite won a Grammy for Best Metal Performance, and it features arguably their most iconic song to date, Change in the House of Flies. And this one pretty much picks up where the last one left off, but they introduced even more experimentation into their sound, like the screeching female vocals on Knife Party, or the trip-hop influence in Teenagers. This is also the album where Frank Delgado became a full-time member on the turntables. He had done some guest work on the band's previous albums, but you can really hear his contribution to their overall atmosphere on this album. It also featured guest vocals from Scott Weiland of Stone Temple Pilots on RX Queen and Maynard James Keenan of Tool on Passenger. Overall, the band was on top of their game, but they showed no signs of coasting or slowing down and released their self-titled album in 2003. It debuted at number 2 on Billboard, and it went gold just 2 months after its release. Musically, it was a lot more straightforward than their previous work, with bassist Chi Cheng saying, "We've proven that we can musically go in any direction we want, and we want to get kind of heavy with this one." And he wasn't lying. And also, thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Squarespace gives people a powerful and beautiful platform from which to create your own website. You can connect with your audience and generate revenue through gated, members-only content. You can also manage your members, send email communications, and leverage audience insights, all on one easy-to-use platform. Create a community on your Squarespace website with a fully integrated commenting system that supports threaded comments, replies, and likes. And use their powerful blogging tools to categorize, share, and schedule your posts as well. And extend Squarespace's already powerful e-commerce capabilities with Squarespace extensions. These new third-party tools can help you manage inventory, promote products, streamline booking, reconcile and file sales tax, and ship items across the globe. You can also display posts from your social profiles on your website and automatically push website content to your favorite social media channels so your followers can share it too. So if you want to check it out, go to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to the link in the description of this video to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. They introduced the 7-string guitars on this one, and it features some of their heaviest moments as a band, with the song Hexagram being probably the heaviest song they've ever done. And despite it being considered the most quote-unquote metal album that they've ever done, it still had a lot of those experimental moments that really define their work. For example, the shoegazy song Minerva. But even though it seemed like they were on top of the world, coming into their next album, things were not necessarily great in the Deftones camp. Going into their 5th album, Saturday Night Wrist, the band was at a low point. Tension between the band members was rising, Chino was struggling with drug addiction, and overall, it was just not a fun time for the band. The album did have some standout songs, for example, Hole in the Earth or Cherry Waves. But overall, a lot of people felt like the album was just kind of inconsistent compared to their previous work. Almost like it just sounded like a collection of ideas put together without any real structure or idea behind the order. And I am not the only person to think that, because the band has gone on record many times about how recording the album was just a horrible process. For example, as Chino said, communications stopped. Instead of us arguing about things, we just gave up, like trying to fight or even to try and communicate. Chino also went on to say, the album was fragmented in a really bad way. No one took the driver's seat there, so it was like no direction, and at the very end, there was all these pieces that you kind of had to stack them together and try to make an album out of it, and that's how it sounds to me when I listen back to it. But despite the band being at such a low point, after they were done with the touring cycle for Saturday Night Wrist, they started working on their next studio album, Eros. But in 2008, as they were recording, their bassist Chi Cheng was involved in a tragic car accident that left him in a coma for 5 years before eventually passing away in 2013, rest in peace. At the time, the band had played a few benefit shows to support their friend, with members of Korn, Slipknot, Hatebreed, and Machine Head, among others, releasing a track called A Song for Chi, with all the proceeds going to Chi and his family.
What's up? This is Head, and I'm going to ask everybody that's watching this, everybody that has a heart that beats, to go out and buy this song for Chi.
In the wake of Chi's accident, a good friend of the band named Sergio Vega, who had been in other bands like Absolution and Quicksand, filled Chi's shoes on bass, and the band decided not to release any of the material from Eros, and instead started from scratch and released Diamond Eyes. It debuted at number 6 on Billboard and was a huge return to form for the band. It was easily their best material since White Pony, and today is considered a fan favorite and one of their best albums overall. It was named Album of the Year by Kerrang, Rock Album of the Year by iTunes, and was also named the 4th best metal album of the entire 2010s by Metal Sucks. And as for Eros, it's really still up in the air as to whether the band is ever going to release any of that material. It was the last material to feature Chi, so it'd be great if we got to hear that at some point. And the band have discussed releasing the material in some sort of condensed form as an EP or something, because a lot of the songs just never got finished. But there are a couple songs floating around from Eros, most notably a song called Smile. But as for the album as a whole, it's never seen the light of day, and whether it ever will, well, that is up to the band. And coming off of the band's return to form with Diamond Eyes, in 2012 they released the follow-up, Koi no Yokan, which was also a huge success for the band, debuting at number 11 on Billboard, and is also considered one of the best albums they've ever done. Musically, it was more laid back compared to Diamond Eyes, incorporating a lot more quiet, atmospheric moments. For example, on the song Entombed. And following up that success, in 2016, they released Gore, which debuted at number 2 on Billboard, making it their biggest chart entry since their self-titled album in 2003. But this album was much more divisive than the previous two. On the one hand, there are people who absolutely love this album and think that it's the best thing the band has ever done. While on the other hand, you've got people who think that it is their absolute worst album. Very polarizing. And the reason why it's so divisive is probably because it has less variety than their other releases. It embraces those post-punk and shoegaze influences, but it's also a lot less riff-focused than some of their other albums. And part of that might be that Stephen Carpenter was admittedly less involved in the creative process this time around, as most of those metal influences come from him. He was there every day, very present in the studio there. It totally took him a while to get invested in what we were doing, and it wasn't our intention to exclude him. Obviously, he's one of my favorite parts of this band, and what he brings to the plate is very important, but you know, sometimes people are in different headspaces. It's as simple as that. That's according to Chino Moreno. So if you like Deftones for their more atmospheric side, you're probably going to love this album. But if you're in it for the riffs and more the heavy moments, well, this one is probably not going to be your cup of tea. But things are about to get a lot less divisive with their next album, Ohms. It was released in 2020 and debuted at number 5 on Billboard, and was met with pretty much universal praise from both fans and critics alike. And musically, it's kind of like a greatest hits compilation. It has elements from everything they've ever done in one neat package, ranging from the heaviest parts of their self-titled album, all the way to the more atmospheric stuff of Koi no Yokan. Which brings us to the last question: what is their lasting impact and legacy? Well, for one, many of the most notable metalcore bands of this generation have been very heavily inspired by Deftones, most notably maybe Architects and Spiritbox. And there's also a somewhat smaller but steadily growing scene of metalcore bands that are basically like, hey, what if Deftones had breakdowns? The most notable examples being Sleep Token and Loathe. And those bands obviously have more to offer than just Deftones with breakdowns, but you get the idea. That's basically what it is at the most simple level. There's also a flavor of black metal called black gaze, which is basically black metal combined with shoegaze, as popularized by Def Heaven, and sounds like this. That's not maybe directly inspired by Deftones, but as the band that introduced shoegaze to the world of metal, I think that the through line is there. And lastly, there is the unlikely influence with a bunch of these like mainstream Billboard Top 200 artists who were inspired by Deftones, most notably one of the most popular artists in the entire world, The Weeknd. But maybe their biggest contribution is showing people in the metal world that it's okay to experiment, that it's okay to go outside the box. With the kind of influence that they have, you have to ask yourself, think of how many bands would have been afraid to evolve and change their sound if it wasn't for Deftones. As one example of that, Sam from Architects went on record as saying that he wasn't sure if they would have ever evolved from their like djenty metalcore kind of sound to what they're doing now, more of the industrial melodic rock kind of thing, if it wasn't for Deftones. As he put it, when people have tried pigeonholing them, they have always broken out of the box. Like I said before, some people call them the Radiohead of metal, because even though they always change and evolve their sound over time, they always keep that same fundamental backbone where you can always tell it's Deftones. But regardless of what you personally think their music, their contribution to the world of rock and metal is objectively immeasurable. They've been a band now for over 30 years, so whenever they choose to hang it up as a band and call it a day is up for anybody to guess. I certainly don't know the answer to that, but what I do know is that when they do, we're going to look back on them as one of these iconic, legendary bands where if we didn't have them, the scene just wouldn't be the same. All right, my friends, that does it for this video. As always, let me know what you think in the comments. Also, I want to thank everybody who supports me on Patreon, especially those of you who support at the True Cult level or above. Patrons get all my podcasts early. I think I'm going to start releasing my videos early as well. I do giveaways sometimes. There's members only channels on my Discord. And if you want me to review your music, there is a way to do that as well. Every month I do a call for submissions. If you want me to review something on Twitch, all you need to do is drop it in the comments of that post. Then I will review it live on Twitch for everybody. So if that sounds cool, hit the link in the description of this video. And with that, I'm going to sign off for now, but I will see you next time.